Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I am very excited for our next guest. Natasha Ho is a trained chef and creator of the Well-Traveled Palate, and she is here to talk about how we can make eating more pleasurable. I don't know about you guys, but being in COVID, stuck indoors, we're kind of forced to either like cook more or order in, and a lot of times when we're ordering in, it's like mostly because we just are looking for something that has more flavor, so I'm super excited to hear from Natasha about how we can actually bring some flavor to our plate so we can enjoy the food that we eat, because that's super, super important. And we're going to talk about why throughout this interview. So anyways, welcome Natasha to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony, for having me.
You're so welcome. So the first question I always ask my guests is to introduce themselves by sharing who you are, what you do, and more importantly, why you do what you do.
Well, thank you. I'm Natasha Ho, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. I am a trained chef, and I'm also the creator of the Well-Traveled Palate. And what I do, I help foodies and food lovers learn how to cook a wide variety of consistently delicious foods so that they can have more fun, more ease, and especially more joy when they're in the kitchen. And bringing the fun into cooking and eating is really my mission when it comes to food. And so how I do that is I get in the kitchen with people through virtual cooking lessons, and we will do everything from creating bespoke menus to working with them to working with spices from around the world. I love to introduce my clients to foods from around the world. And the reason is because my own travels took me around the world and introduced me to a lot of new flavors. So I had a traditional culinary education. I went to a cooking school, but what I realized, I was living in New York at the time, and what I realized was the thing that really interested me were all these amazing restaurants that I had access to. I was like eating Filipino food or Malaysian food or Brazilian food. And so I wanted to know more about how to work with those kinds of dishes. And so I quit my life in New York City and decided to travel the world for 3 months. And so I went to places like Morocco and Brazil and Turkey and absorbed so much information from cooks and chefs on how to work with flavors. And so I kind of put the recipes to the side and really focused on how do I get the flavor into the food and how do I make eating really, really fun and enjoyable for, the experience of eating, but also for health, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to consistently eat good food and eat healthy food. You have to enjoy it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's something that became really important for me. And the whole entire experience was really about building my confidence, building the confidence that I needed to be in the kitchen. When I was younger, my mom and my grandmother, all those people were great at cooking, but I was so intimidated by the idea of getting in the kitchen because they seemed like they just knew what to do. Like they would just spice this and do that. And I did not have that natural inclination. And so I built my confidence through understanding more about flavor, understanding more about how to enhance the flavor in it, certain ingredients. And so for me, building that boost of confidence that came in the kitchen really transcended throughout the rest of my other aspects of life, like in my relationships, in my career. It's funny that you can take a small risk and build your confidence in one area, and then it really will permeate the other parts of your life. So really for me, it was transformative, not just to get great at cooking, but to build my confidence there helped propel me into my career and just taking a lot of steps forward in life. So that's why I do what I do to help other people build that confidence and to feel really great about what it is that you can create and share with your family.
Totally. I love that. And you're right. It's never one thing, right? It's always like, okay, this is like a new thing to me. I'm going to give it a try, and it builds that confidence. But with food comes connection. So now you feel more confident. So you're more likely to cook with your family. And let's talk about the fact that it's true. Like when you make that connection with relationships, like somebody who, if you can, like, that's the way people show love, right? You make somebody a
Exactly.
dish, right? It's like a nice thing. And then, it can be a little bit stressful if both partners don't know how to cook. I'm sure you're spending a lot of money on takeout, and like it can be really challenging. But I definitely want to kind of go back to what you said about in the beginning, like some people, they've never been in the kitchen, very similar to your story or anyone. When you start something new, it feels unfamiliar. and you kind of just like shy away from it, but it sounds like you help kind of bridge the gap of like getting people comfortable in the kitchen. It reminds me of kind of like a trainer and somebody who's like afraid to go to the gym. It's like sometimes meeting with the trainer really helps them get in there and just to realize like it's not as intimidating as you think. You just kind of have to show up, and then with the right guidance you can get like the comfort level, to kind of whip up anything.
Exactly. And I think people look at, cooking shows, or they look at the kind of the media representation of what cooking looks like. And so they think like, I need to go from here to there. And
Hmm.
really it's about helping people get comfortable where they are and learn how to feel confident working with very simple things and then building on that skill set. But yeah, exactly. I'm your cooking trainer. I get in the kitchen with you.
I love it. No, it's amazing. And it's so needed right now. Like it's so needed right now because I can't even tell you how many of my clients come to me and talk to me like not only about like the flavors situation, but especially I work with a lot of moms and a lot of the people, a lot of the women that do most of the cooking for the
Right.
household. And now they're not only just cooking dinner, but they're also having to make the kids lunch because the kids are home from school and they're making 3 meals a day. They're tired of cooking. Like to them, it's no longer a joy. It's just the mundane. I have to, not I get to. Like it's there, but it's not their fault. Like it's exhausting right now with everything that we're expected to be able to do in today's like right now within the pandemic. But the one recommendation I tell them or I give them is put some music on, get a new recipe, like make it an experience because this is it. This is unfortunately this is the situation, so we can't really change it, but we can change our perspective and we can bring joy back into it. And I think part of that too is no longer just cooking to please everybody else in the household, but also to please yourself, to make sure you're making meals that take into consideration the flavors that you like and what you need. And I think that if we did more of that, I think we'd all feel a lot more satisfied. And then we
Right.
wouldn't end up at night when the kids go to bed, when everyone's in bed, then like going through the cabinets and just like looking for something to kind of fill that void, right? It starts
Exactly.
in the
Yeah.
kitchen.
Yeah, and being able to cook meals that will satiate you and that also excite that creative side of your brain. And I think the redundancy is like it contributes to the burnout that people
Yeah,
have, is
so
because
much
the
burnout.
brain it
Mhm,
wants new and novel things, and we're
mhm.
used to being able to go out, go on vacations, go to new places, and so that novelty keeps us excited. And so I think the redundancy of you get in that rut, it starts to contribute to the burnout that people
Mhm.
are experiencing right now. So, a part of that is introducing yourself to something new so that you can still have access to that creative, novel part of the brain.
Yeah. So before we talk about maybe how someone would get out of that rut to like bring
Mm.
flavor to their dishes, I am curious if there. You mentioned like maybe watching Food Network and expecting you from to go from like kind of 0 to 100. But are there any other mistakes that people might make when cooking that doesn't, make what they're eating pleasurable?
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the first ones I talk about is texture issues. And the reason I bring this up is, especially if you're cooking for little people, which I have a son, he's 18 months. And so I'm cooking for a
Oh,
little
little
person.
little. He's
little,
a
little, yes.
really little. So
But
cute.
it's introducing him to new food. So I'm very conscious around texture because I know that kids are sensitive to that. So the first thing, if you're cooking vegetables and you're ending up with vegetables that are mushy, or you have the experience of things being over or undercooked, there's a couple things that might be happening that I often point out because it happens frequently with my clients. The first thing is, if you have mushy food, it's probably that you're overcrowding your food when you're cooking it. So if you're cooking food on the stovetop, like you're making stir fry, or maybe you're roasting vegetables in the oven, you will end up basically steaming your food if you put too much food on the pot or in the pan, because the water that's coming out of that food will be cooking the food that's next to it. So instead of that high heat that creates that wonderful caramelized, crusty texture that we want, so we get those crisp, wonderful vegetables, we end up with mushy vegetables and basically the boiled or steamed vegetables, which most people don't really care for that because it doesn't have a
Mm-mm.
lot of flavor. So when you're trying to get that beautiful texture, the crunchiness, that crisp thing, we need to make sure that we don't overcrowd. So just cooking in batches is a simple solution there. And the other thing is over or undercooked food. Usually that's because we have mismatched shape of the food. So if you're when you're chopping up your vegetables, making sure that they're approximately the same size will also help to make sure that you don't end up with one piece that's perfectly cooked, one piece that's undercooked, and one piece that's overcooked. Everything will
Hmm.
be perfectly cooked at the same time. And it's very those are two very simple things that you can adjust in order to fix any texture issues that you might be having with the food.
Yeah, I actually didn't know about the overcrowding of like the plates or bowls. That's very makes so much sense. So thank you for explaining that. Do you teach knife skills?
I do. I do
Because
teach knife skills.
because
That's
you're
what
like
we always
everything has to be even, but like if you see the way that I cut things, and I'm a dietitian, so part of the training is we go through a whole like food service. Like I did all the classes, like all the things that taught me how to cut, and I blame my knives. I need to invest in good knives. I think if I had better knives, my cuts would be a lot more. If they're supposed to be like cube like, it'd be more cube like.
I do go over knife skills, and the knife itself is an important thing. It's the one place where I'm like, okay, if you're going to invest in something in a kitchen, investing in a
Yeah.
knife is important. But even if you don't spend a whole lot, like I have recommendations for knives that are under $50 for my clients. The most important thing is making sure it's sharp,
Right.
because a sharp knife will make you so much more efficient in the kitchen. If you have a dull knife, it's dangerous and it also slows you down. So make sure you have
Totally.
sharp knives in your kitchen.
Totally. And
Um,
tuck your thumb.
and
Sorry.
tuck, yes,
Tuck your
tuck
thumb.
your thumb.
I've
Yeah.
cut my thumb many times. Many
Yeah,
times.
you got to practice that claw grip. Make sure that
It's
you're
so uncomfortable. It's so weird. But then I'm just like, I like my fingers. I'd rather keep my fingers. So let's make sure they're tucked. Oh man. Oh, those are great. So, okay. So how would somebody kind of get out of a rut if they are looking to make their food taste better? And also
yeah.
healthy, like healthy and balanced. And we know, like, so just for anybody who's new to the podcast, when we use the term healthy, it means balance. It doesn't mean that it just has to have veggies or just protein or whatever your perception of healthy is. For us, healthy is helping you to satisfy your physical needs and your emotional needs as well, and your mental needs as well. So that's where bringing flavor to the dish is super important. So when someone's trying to eat a healthy meal, a balanced meal, but also they want to enjoy it, like how do they get out of this rut of kind of just like maybe just like cooking either what's quickest or cooking without much flavor?
Right. So the first thing I encourage people to do in order to not make this overwhelming is to look at what you already know and not discount what you already know how to do in the kitchen, whether it's like how to scramble eggs or you know how to boil water. If you can
Mm-hmm.
start with something really simple, look at what you already know and look at any dishes that you've already mastered really well, break those down into the elements, their component elements, and then start to add new flavors or new ingredients. So it's really about, if you kind of think of it as like a jazz musician, it's being able to riff on what it is that you already know and then tweak what you're already making in your kitchen into order to turn it into something new. So an example of this I had is like pancakes. I was making pancakes at home and realized I was out of milk one morning. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Start going through all the cabinets, trying to find something else to replace the milk with. So I was like, okay, I have coconut milk. So that was kind of milk, not quite, but I was
It's
like, I
thick.
had
Yeah.
coconut milk in there. And then I actually had pineapple sitting in my refrigerator as well. So I was like, okay, tropical flavors. This is what we're going with. And so I replaced the milk in the recipe with coconut milk. And then I took the pineapple I had and I mixed that with my maple syrup. And I made maple syrup infused pineapple to go on top of my coconut pancakes. And so
Oh
it
my
wasn't,
gosh.
it was something simple, pancakes and maple syrup. You do that all the time, but I just used what was on hand in order to tweak it a little bit. So I didn't have to learn how to make a brand new thing. I know how to make pancakes. I just used coconut milk instead of regular milk. And all I did was I simmered the pineapple in some maple syrup. So warmed it up together, and now I have this brand new version. So it's like keeping the intrigue, keeping something interesting. So I'm not just eating plain pancakes. I now
Yeah.
have a new way of enjoying something that I make frequently. So that's one of the key things I encourage people to do is build your confidence by using something you already know and tweaking it in a new way by introducing yourself to new ingredients or new flavors. And some of the basic ways that are really great for doing this what I do with my clients is having them swap out the fat source that's in their food. So fat source can be like the oils usually that you're working with. So if you're typically, a lot of us reach for olive oil in the kitchen. Instead of reaching for the olive oil, try using a different kind of fat source. It could be butter, it could be sesame oil, it could be coconut oil, avocado oil. It could be any kind of other fat that you want to work with, and using that as a starting point, because fat enriches our flavor with our food with a lot of flavor. And so you'll quickly transform a dish by just changing the fat source. So if you were making scrambled eggs, if you swapped out your oil for butter, you're going to instantly transform the taste of those eggs. If you swapped it for working with avocado oil, one that I love is nitirkebe, and it's actually, if you've ever had ghee, it's like Indian ghee, but it's Ethiopian spiced butter. So they take that ghee and then they add spices in, they simmer it. And so now you have this wonderful infusion of spices in the butter. And I cook eggs in that, I'll cook vegetables in that. And so you get a whole bunch of flavor from the butter and the spices. And I don't have to cook something new. I can just swap in that one ingredient. And now I'm like, oh, this tastes absolutely different than how it tasted last week.
Definitely. And so here's the thing that I'm just going to say, wherever people who are listening who might think, they think butter and they think that's unhealthy, and I'm using air quotes. And so, because we do know that choosing olive oil or avocado oil, so like your plant-based oils most often are going to be more beneficial for the heart. But at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying the food that you like, then it honestly doesn't matter, because then you end up overeating on all of like these other foods that just you, and you don't feel good about yourself at the end of the day either. So I think it's just coming up with your staples. And then like Natasha said, it's, occasionally, like for me, one of my staples is like a shrimp scampi, but without the butter, to be honest. Like I do it with like olive oil, lots of garlic, maybe some lemon juice. And I just always keep frozen shrimp in my freezer. It's something I teach my clients. But then like occasionally, if I'm looking for more flavor and I'm like, that's just not going to do it for me, I will add butter to it and it'll be like a legit scampi, and it's so much more satisfying. And then I'm not looking for anything afterwards. Like I'm good there. So I just want to kind of like reinforce to the listeners that, it's okay to use these foods for cooking, for flavor, like, and if the rest of your day is balanced and your plate is balanced, like that's okay.
Totally. And one of the things, kind of going back to when we were talking about mistakes that people make in the kitchen, it is not considering the seasoning and flavor and making sure that the meal will be satiating to you,
Mm-hmm.
by including all of those different tastes, like having it be a little sweet, having it be savory, having it be salty, having it be bitter, having the
Mm-hmm.
sour, like having spiciness, all of those different things, because like we were talking about before, like your brain wants to feel like it's tasting something new and interesting. And so when you get into that rut, it makes it a lot harder for you to maintain eating those nutritious foods, because you get bored. And
Yeah,
it's just natural and human for us to
totally.
get bored. And then that's, like you were talking about earlier, you end up in the cabinet, raiding the cabinet, trying to find
Yeah.
something, or picking up
Yeah.
the
And
phone and trying to get
nothing
takeout.
satisfies you. Nothing satisfies you.
Yeah, yeah. And so by being able to take some of those risks in the kitchen around flavor, it makes it much easier for you to maintain that routine
Mhm.
around eating things that will be really supporting your health and great for your body,
Mhm.
versus having to turn to some of those things that are just going to satisfy that sudden urge that you have.
Right.
So I really, when I talk to people, encourage them to think about how to balance all those different tastes out, and using a little bit of an ingredient, whether it's butter or salt, to enhance those flavors.
Yeah.
Sugar, it's like they don't have to be the complete enemy. We can use them in order to make the meal satiating, and so that you enjoy your food and you really love it and you continue eating food that's great for you, versus turning to some of those other processed foods that are not going to be good for you, and they're going to overload you with all those things that you were trying to avoid in the first place.
Exactly. It's a catch 22. I know. It's crazy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about maybe some different ways to transform that flavor, particularly with veggies, because I think that a lot of people say they don't know how to cook veggies, or they never make their veggies never taste good.
Mhm.
I am curious too if you have any tips specifically for like frozen veggies, how to make them taste better, only because like I recommend often that you can have frozen veggies. They're just as nutritious, if not more so. It's just the texture or like the flavor just like isn't as great. So you're kind of it's like a toss up. But obviously, putting veggies on the plate is better than not putting veggies on the plate.
Right.
So relying on the ones in your freezer, I find to be helpful. So any tips about how to transform the flavor of veggies in general? And then if you could maybe give a tip, if you have any, about frozen, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So a couple things in terms of when we're cooking vegetables, I always encourage people to be as loving with the seasoning and the flavor with vegetables as they would be with more expensive things they might do. Like if I have seafood or I have meat in the kitchen, I will always want to make sure that I really enhance the flavor. So when it comes to working with your vegetables, have that same attention to them. So making sure we season everything, including salads. If you have greens, those also need to be seasoned. So we're using things like salt on those as well. It doesn't have to be a lot, but we're just enhancing the natural flavor that's in those items. Another thing that people don't often think about, which affects flavor a lot, is seasonality and size of your vegetables. So when you're buying vegetables that are in season, you're going to get a whole lot more flavor in those vegetables. For a couple reasons. One, they didn't have to travel as far; they were probably able to be harvested near you, and so you're going to stay on the vine much longer and be able to. Their natural flavor is going to develop more while they're still growing, and then transported to you. So you're going to get a lot more flavor. They'll be more affordable, more sustainable. They're really good for you for a lot of different reasons. So being aware of what's in season and buying vegetables based on the season is another thing. And size. If you buy smaller vegetables, they'll often be sweeter than if you buy larger vegetables, which will tend to have more bitter flavors in them. As vegetables grow, some of the natural sugars that are in them start to turn more into starches, and so they're less accessible for the taste buds. So that's something else to consider, is the seasonality and the size. Before we even get into the kitchen, that will affect the flavor that we're getting from our veggies. So once we do get into the kitchen, a couple things that I encourage people to do. One is caramelization, and caramelization helps to enhance the natural sweet flavors in our food. And a lot of people are sensitive to the bitterness that is in vegetables. It's very natural for us to be kind of repelled by bitter flavors because our body associates those with poison. And so we know to avoid things that are bitter because those are usually not something that's good for us. So in order
Wow, you mean
to
our body like naturally protects us?
It
Sure.
does. It does. So yeah, if your kid spits out those vegetables, it's for good reason. It's their body telling them like, "Hey, this is bitter. I don't think I'm supposed to eat this." So
Yeah.
don't get upset with them. Instead, you can enhance the sweet flavors in there that our body tells us are a good thing and diminish some of those bitter flavors. So caramelization helps to enhance those sweet flavors. And caramelization, what that is basically heating the food up and transforming it through a chemical process. And so during that chemical process, the sugars will start to transform, the proteins will transform, and you'll get more sweetness, more savory flavors, more nutty flavors. And so you can do this by roasting vegetables in the oven at high heat. You could do this on the stovetop with searing them or sauteing them. And so that caramelization is a very simple thing that, like with roasting vegetables, I do that all the time. My uncle was a vegetable hater. He's like 50, 60 years old, still hates vegetables. And he came over to my house one time. He didn't have enough time to like stick around for dinner. So he was like, I'm sorry, I'm just going to grab a plate and run. And I was like, no problem. So in order to be nice, because he took the plate and ran, he's like, I'm going to eat everything because I put vegetables on the plate. And so he decided to eat them. And afterward, he calls me up and he's like, what were those things that were on the plate that you sent home with me? And I was just like, I think I had roasted like parsnips or something like that. He
Oh,
was like,
nice.
those are so good.
Amazing.
Yeah, those are vegetables. But so something as simple as roasting the vegetables can change the flavor a lot and enhance those natural sweet flavors that we enjoy. So that's one of the ones that is easy to master and that I encourage people to do first and foremost. Some other things that you can do is smoking. As we're getting back into, being able to go outside. If you're smoking meat on the grill or anything else that you have on the grill, doing the same thing with your vegetables, that adds a ton of flavor. So you can put your vegetables out there as well. I love to do quick pickling on veggies as well. So that's just doing a combination of like sugar, salt, and vinegar and allow allowing the vegetables to sit in a pickling liquid for a few hours, and will enhance the flavor of the vegetable. And then you still have that beautiful crisp texture to the veggie as well. So if you ever had like, they do this a lot in like Vietnamese cooking, they'll do pickling of the daikon radish and the carrots. You can do that at home really, really easily. And it's a wonderful topper for sandwiches and salads, or anything really. I love putting it on tacos. I'll make tacos and put that on top of it. And then the last one that I encourage people to do is layering flavor. So just finding the spices that you enjoy and layering those on top. So what I would do for like for roasted seasonal vegetables, I used Jamaican jerk seasoning on top of my roasted vegetables. So the same kinds of things that you might put, like a barbecue rub or a Jamaican jerk rub, or maybe it's Chinese five spice, using those same kinds of things that we traditionally associate maybe with the main entree or the meaty kind of portion of our meal, using them on our vegetables and layering those flavors there is something else that will add a lot more intrigue and appealingness to those vegetables.
Definitely, definitely. Those are so many great tips. Like I'm loving this so much. Let's speak a little bit. Can you speak a little bit to, because you mentioned spices and as for flavor, but what about also for your health? Like, what are
Oh,
the
and I
benefits?
forgot. Sorry, you asked about the frozen veggies. I
Oh
forgot.
yeah, good. I would have probably remembered at the end, but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, it just popped into my head. Let me address that. So yes, on frozen veggies, I frozen vegetables are a great alternative, especially because we were talking about seasonality. Stuff isn't always in season, so getting frozen is a great alternative, and also just for the ease of keeping them, on hand and being able to toss them into stuff. With frozen vegetables, I love to transform those by mixing them into like a stir fry or a soup. They do super well in soup, as well as if you're doing like a grain dish. So maybe I'm doing quinoa, or I'm doing rice, or sorghum, or something like that. And then mixing those in there is something else that is really a great way to use them. And then I'm not as worried about the texture itself. Like, I'm not trying to necessarily get like a super crisp texture from them, more so using their flavor and enhancing the rest of the dish. They don't work as well for texture, like with caramelization, because they've retained more water. And so it's harder to get that crispness. Some vegetables do better than others. If you have a larger cut of a vegetable, it will do better in terms of caramelizing. So maybe if you have like Brussels sprouts or something that are frozen and they're larger, it'll be easier to get some of that that caramelization on them. If they're smaller pieces, it becomes more difficult for you to get that. So I usually will stick with things where I'm mixing them in.
That's a good point. I think that makes sense, right? Because then they're blended. They're not like you're just eating the vegetable solo, because they're not that flavorful. But if you combine it with other things, then it makes it better. I like that. That's awesome. That's great. Okay, so let's speak to the health benefits of spices.
Yeah. Well, spices are like my go-to. I really, really, really like my mission. Part of my mission is also like getting people to use more spices, because I think that's something, at least in the Western world, I feel like we shy away from spices a bit. And most of us are like, yeah, salt and pepper, and then maybe like garlic powder or something
I'm
like
salt,
that.
pepper, garlic powder, onion powder. That's all I know.
Yeah.
Literally the only spices I ever use. Occasionally cumin if I want a Mexican flair, but
yeah.
that's about it. That's where I say I'm done there. But no, I'm working on this too, guys. This episode is selfishly for me as well. I need to do a better job putting flavor into my meals. Like, I really do. I really do. So I'm excited to try some of these things.
Yeah. So like, you basically are the perfect example of what I'm talking about. Most of us feel comfortable in that realm. But being able to step out into some of the other spices, it has a lot of value for the flavor, obviously, but also for health. Because many of the spices have anti-inflammatory properties. They also are really high in antioxidants, which is great for the repair of our bodies, to prevent, the breakdowns that happen with aging and that cause a lot of disease. They're also really rich in lots of nutrients. For instance, cumin, you mentioned, is really high in iron. Cardamom is high in magnesium and zinc. So they have a lot of properties that help us with our health. More specifically, like cinnamon is a great one. Has a lot of antioxidant
I use a lot of cinnamon. Should have
properties.
said that.
Yeah,
I do use a lot of
nice.
cinnamon. But I mean, I think that's also super common. That's my only sweet one. The only other ones are like savory. My sweet one is cinnamon, occasionally cocoa powder. Occasionally.
Nice. Actually, cocoa is another one that has a bunch of antioxidant properties, so
Yeah.
that's another good one. Cinnamon's also known to help with lowering blood sugar. So people who have diabetes or are prone to diabetes are often encouraged to include more cinnamon in their diet. And I think in the U.S. we typically associate cinnamon with sweets dishes, but it can have a ton of savory applications as well. So if you've ever eaten Indian food or Lebanese food, anything from like the Middle East or Persia or North Africa, they use a ton of cinnamon in savory applications. And that was one of the reasons as I was traveling, I was introduced to that. I was like, oh my goodness, I only think of cinnamon like cinnamon rolls, cinnamon toast, like all those things. But cinnamon pairs beautifully with other dishes. So I love to do it in a rub on my chicken, and you can pair it with other spices. Warm spices is what cinnamon goes well with. So other warm spices might be like nutmeg. You could also pair it nicely with smoky spices like paprika. If you've ever had like a Southern style barbecue rub, cinnamon works really well in those kinds of flavors as well. So cinnamon is one that you don't have to just put aside for the sweets. It can go with your savory items as well. It's great in a rub. And I also will put like a cinnamon stick in anytime I'm making a grain. So if you make like basmati rice, stick a stick of cinnamon in there, and it will permeate, and it'll have this beautiful perfume that will make your kitchen smell absolutely divine, and it'll also taste really good.
Yeah, I mean, the only candles I ever get are like vanilla or cinnamon flavor, like smells. So that sounds amazing. If I could like naturally just make my apartment smell like that.
Yeah.
This is so, I'm excited to try that. That I can do. That one I can do, because like I already have. Like, right. We're meeting me where I'm at. Like I'm comfortable with cinnamon. I'm gonna put cinnamon in my rice and see what happens. I'll get a cinnamon stick. And
it's super, that's the perfect place to start. I throw it in rice. I'll throw it any kind of grain that you're cooking. Really, it does well. If you're ever like slow cooking chicken or something like that, you could also throw the cinnamon sticks in there, and that will add some flavor. So very easy place to start. Another great one is turmeric. Turmeric is known for another anti-inflammatory, and I love to use turmeric as a layering spice. So if you are working with other things in the kitchen, like paprika or cumin or coriander, those ones pair really beautifully with turmeric, and it adds a lovely color to your food. So if you've ever seen like Moroccan chicken and it has that wonderful yellow color to it, that's from the turmeric. And this is an easy one that you can add in with some of the other spices if you want to get more into like blending those flavors together. I encourage you to use the turmeric because it doesn't have it's not one that is like kind of has a super big flavor. It's one that kind of sits in the background and pairs nicely with other friends. And the last one is garlic, which I think most of us are familiar with garlic, so it's an easy one for us.
I'm Italian. Never too much garlic.
Never too much garlic. Garlic is great for heart health, and it tastes good with pretty much anything. I don't know if I've ever had anything where garlic didn't work work with it. I was just cooking with a client last night, and I realized everything we were making was like smothered in garlic. We made garlicky string beans. We made a cucumber salad that also had garlic in it, and we did a 3-cup tofu, which is like a Taiwanese dish, and that also had a bunch of garlic in it.
Gosh.
So garlic
is
it's so good, and it's also good for you.
Definitely. And just like as you were talking, I was thinking about like most cultures have a protein present or a veggie present or a starch present, right? So when I teach my clients, I teach them the plate method. It's super simple. I have them, it's a way for them to enjoy, all food groups so they don't have to eliminate or just, restrict. But they just have mostly veggies, a protein, and a starch. And I say that to say that sometimes that people will come to me and say, kind of tired of chicken, like, or I'm tired of the fish I make, like, I'm just like tired of it. And I always tell them, like, change the flavor profile. Like, so if it's like a chicken that you're tired of the chicken, like do it like an Italian flavors and seasonings, and then a Greek flavors and seasonings, and then Indian, and then like just like go around the world like how you just kind of described, and then it doesn't feel like you're having the same dish. So it's like you can have like chicken, rice, and broccoli, but if you could have like 12 with you probably have like 75 different ways. How many countries there are, I don't know how many countries there are, but like a lot of different ways. I'm still like hooked on the maple pineapple syrup. Like I'm still like, oh my God, I need those pancakes. That sounds amazing. Like,
They're
yes.
really delicious. I
But
have to.
anyways,
I actually
yeah.
impressed myself with that one. I was like, this is really good.
Like, so good. Have you ever been on Chopped or tried to get on Chopped?
No, I haven't. That sounds like it's so much pressure.
Wait,
Honestly, I'm
look what
like,
you did. You could you'd be fine. You'd be fine.
yeah,
Oh my God.
I love watching other people though, like seeing the creativity. But one of the things that I tell people when they're looking at that and they're like, I want to get good at improvising and basically like kind of be somebody who can walk into a kitchen and do whatever. The people that are on those shows, they have a index of recipes in their
Yeah.
mind. And so they don't usually come up with something brand new. They kind of just have learned how to slot things in. So you can do the same thing. Like think about that index of dishes that you have, whether it's stuff that your parents cooked or something that you learned how to cook as you develop more experience in the kitchen, and use that Rolodex to figure out like, okay, well, when I make pancakes or something I've been making a lot of is pork shoulder. My husband really enjoys pork shoulder. So I'm going through my Rolodex. Okay, I know how to braise a pork shoulder. So one week we had Mexican and we got out the cumin and the oregano and the chilies, and that was the pork shoulder. The next week I was like, okay, we're going to go Chinese. So we went with, we what was it that we had?
Soy sauce? Is that not right, accurate?
My
I can hear you.
oh, sorry, there's an
That's
issue with my sound.
that's okay. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes.
Oh no.
Did your Bluetooth cut out or something?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. I think for some reason my earpods like connected to my husband. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Okay. Can you, all
Okay,
right, you want to
sorry.
pick up where we left off?
I can pick up where I left off. Yeah.
Okay. So
So
you did the pork shoulder and then you were
right.
talking about making it Chinese
Mexican
flavors.
first. Yeah. So we
Yeah.
did Mexican that first week. And then the next week we moved into doing Chinese. And so I got out the soy sauce and the garlic and the ginger and the sesame oil. And then this past week it was Indian. And so I looked through the cupboard and I had some ghee in the cupboard. We had cardamom pods and I had some coconut milk and tomatoes. So we went with the flavors of India. So I used that kind of the index of, okay, I know how to braise pork shoulder, and it could be, you know how to grill chicken, you know how to roast a chicken, you know how to cook pork chops, you know how to bake a salmon, whatever it is. Like think of that thing you know how to do and use that as your starting point, and then like you said, travel around the world, which is exactly what I do with my clients every week. It's like, okay, we're going to go somewhere new. What is the cuisine that you want to master? What is the cuisine that you get really excited about, whether it's Thai food or maybe it's Mexican food, it's American food, whatever it is that gets you really excited, diving deep into that and working with those flavors. And so you don't necessarily have to get a recipe and figure out like, you know, Google results give you thousands and thousands of recipes, trying to go through all of that. Just use what you already know, and then getting the flavors of that cuisine into the dish will help you to switch things up and avoid being in a rut where you get tired of eating that same thing over and over again.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So tell us a little bit more about what it looks like to work with you, because it sounds really great. It sounds like you're really involved in your client's kitchen and you kind of work with them. Like, how long will they work with you? Like, what does the program look like?
Yeah, so I do bespoke programs. So I work with people anywhere from 6 weeks to a year, and depends on the breadth of things that they want to learn how to do. So some people, it's like we were talking about, knife skills is something that's really important to them. So getting into knife skills, that's pretty much the basic where I start with every client, because that's what you need to know in order to really progress in the kitchen. So we do that, and then we get into all the different kinds of dishes that you want to learn how to make And so some people will do like a 6 month program with me that we will explore new cuisine every single month. And it's a surprise to them. So this month I'm doing Korean food with my clients. We've done Moroccan and we've done Argentine food as well. So it just depends on what they want to master, and figuring out what it is that would create more excitement for them around food, as well as more ease in the kitchen.
Awesome. That's so great. So before we talk about where people can find you, I am curious of all the places that you've traveled when you went on that experience over those 3 months. Like, was there any place that really surprised you or anything that you learned? Like, tell us a little bit more about that experience. I wanted to ask you in the beginning. So
Oh yeah.
I'd love to learn.
Oh man, so many things. One of the first things that I kind of talked about already was being introduced to using more spices. Like I went to Morocco. That was my first stop on the trip. And so my first time like being in that type of a culture, and eating the foods, being tasting the like complexity of the food and all these flavors working together, using like those sweet spices in savory ways. That was something that really, really surprised me. And then some of the other things, like I went to Brazil and learning how to do like they did like fish stews and mixing together flavors like coconut and lime with fish, which to me I was like, is that going to work? I'm not sure about it, but then it's absolutely amazing. And the dish I make all the time now is moqueca, which is a Brazilian fish stew, and it's so delicious. So it's really like these combinations of ingredients that if you were to hear them, you might say that doesn't go together. That's not going to taste very good. And I've even did that with like South African food. I had tamarind, which is like a very sour fruit, mixing that with lamb and doing a lamb stew out of tamarind and lamb. And I was like, sour lamb? That doesn't sound good.
Mm-mm.
It
Mm-mm.
doesn't. But then when you actually taste it, it opens your mind up to the possibility that when you take those kinds of risks, that you can actually find something that completely works and it tastes amazing. And so that I think is what gave me the permission to get into the kitchen and be like, okay, I can kind of mix things up and take a risk where it might be something that doesn't sound right on paper or when I would tell somebody, but when you actually put it in your mouth, your taste buds totally get it and it makes sense. And so
Mm.
that is, I think, the thing that doing that travel, having that experience of tasting the foods from other cultures gave me, because I would never have thought to put those things together myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh my God. And I'm sure just like the traveling itself was probably so much
Oh
fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also.
So, well, when we're able to travel like that again, that sounds like a challenge. You're inspiring. I want to do that. I do.
Yes, eat your way around the world. I highly encourage it.
Oh, sounds amazing. Sounds absolutely amazing. All right. Well, this has been amazing. Is there anything else you want to add? Anything else you think the listeners need to know before we talk about where people can find you?
No, I think the biggest thing is I encourage people to take those risks and
Mhm.
being able to step outside your comfort zone a little bit, and it will introduce you to a world of flavor.
Definitely. Awesome. All right, Natasha, thanks so much for being here. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So, well, today we were talking a lot about taking risks and building your confidence in the kitchen, to get out of those ruts. And the first step in doing that, I believe, is really understanding where you're at with your cooking and your confidence. And so, I have a special invitation for your listeners, Tony. It's a complimentary consultation with me in the kitchen where we focus
Awesome.
on building your confidence and introducing you to some of those new flavors. So, to get that consultation, all you have to do is text the word flavor, FLAVOR, to 66866, and we can evaluate where your confidence is, whether it's the knife skills or you only feel confident with one cuisine and you want to do more, or maybe you're overwhelmed with like, how do I figure out making something nutritious also appealing to eat and taste really good. So we'll explore what that looks like. And the first step is really admitting, I don't know. And then figuring out the step,
Mhm.
that conversation will help you to get to the point of, I know, and I can build the confidence to do this in the kitchen. And then that can be a stepping stone to building the confidence across other realms of your life, whether it's relationships and being able to cook for your connecting with your family, connecting with your partner, whether it's, in your life, it's being able to do a trip like the one I just talked about, when
Yeah.
it's possible to do that again. So all you have to do to reach out to me is text flavor to 66866. And I look forward to talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I'll put that in the show notes. Um, And that, yeah, thank you. This was amazing. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Guys, definitely text Natasha, text flavor to 66866. That sounds like a really great opportunity. I might definitely use it. So just
I would love to talk to you.
FYI.
I feel like we could have a lot of fun in the kitchen.
So much fun. So much fun. Yeah, guys, I mean, I've talked about this before on podcasts. If you work with me, you know, like, I need to do better. Like, my dishes, like, they're okay, but they're not the most flavorful because I just, you know, just used to like making what I do. And I'm, you know, like we all are, we're just busy, we're doing things, we don't really think about it, but I know it's super important because I see it in my clients and how it benefits them when they eat foods that they enjoy. So definitely take Natasha up on that offer. If you're not already subscribed to the Tips with Tony podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. If you feel really nice and you want to write a review, that would be amazing. This is it from us. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.